Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me again. As always, what I try to do is inspire and share things, and hopefully share things that you can take with you to your operations when you design new prototypes, etc. So the reason why I'm here is because we're very exposed to what's happening internationally. There's a lot of information about what's happening on the domestic side, but what I'll try to focus today is on trends and how this post-COVID world is working internationally. So the fact that we are operating all over the world gives us access to what is happening in Asia, what's happening in different markets, which is where a lot of the innovation is happening. And it's really good to see so many friends and faces. We work with a lot of you guys already and become friends, but also with large brands that work across multiple countries and continents. So we really need to adapt. And not only that, we're also operators, right? So the fact that we own our own restaurants that we have as restaurant labs, I've been speaking about them in previous editions here, where we actually test innovation, new stuff in our own restaurants before helping our clients implement them. That has been really, really beneficial. And we have them in Sweden, we have them in LA. Now we're actually building one in the Middle East, in Riyadh, and another one in continental Europe, and one in Australia. So we really want to make sure that we can also test things in different markets and understand how customer behavior is different. And our industry is really changing at an enormous speed. We've all seen it during the pandemic. Everyone needs to adapt, everyone needs to innovate, and it's hard to keep up. I mean, it's hard to keep up even with us that are a large organization and are always with boots on the ground in different markets. So I'll try to just, in 20 minutes, condense as much information as possible. I apologize, there's a lot coming your way, but I'll be around if you have any more questions for the rest of the conference. So one of the things that we've seen is the newer generations are really changing the way they behave and interact with restaurants. And there has to be a reason for them to leave the couch, leave Netflix, because we all have our phones and food is readily available. So if we start with trends we see from an experience perspective, from a physical asset perspective, one of the trends is in chaining the chain. A lot of the newer generations do expect our physical assets to look differently. And there's two trends in that. The first one is certain brands. This is a group called Big Mama Group out of Europe, where the actual restaurant is the same, but every physical asset is different. So the operating model, the kitchen, the menu is the same, but every time you visit a different restaurant, it's a completely different experience. And they're hugely successful. They're growing like wheat. It's really interesting to see that. The other approach, which is similar but opposite, is, like Blue Lane. It's, okay, I have one same brand, but every design is different. And consumers are resonating a lot with this, going away from the cookie cutter traditional style of developing restaurants, which is a challenge for us as designers, right? It was really easy to create one design. We do a book, we do a manual, we roll it out in the hundreds. The world is changing. And I think, especially internationally, we're seeing that big time. To the extent that some concepts and some brands, I don't know if you're familiar with Sublimotion, it's one of the world's most expensive restaurants. You need to book a couple of years ahead. They change the restaurant physically with every dish. So every time a new dish is a tasting menu, the whole restaurant is completely different. We don't have to go to the extreme, but it's just a way of showing you how the consumer's expectations are changing in the way the experiential part of dining is going to be more and more important, because food is a commodity. We can order it at any time, anywhere. So as designers and creative, we really need to think differently of how we design and create our physical experiences. And almost always over-deliver on our expectations. This is a picture from one of our own restaurants. This is a fast casual operation with an average ticket of $13. But still, the look and feel of it feels much more elevated. We really wanted to attract a young female customer. 70% of our clients here are women between 25 and 35. That really want to have a great night out without breaking the bank. So as designers, we can really look not only into the assets, but also into the touch point. Everything that is not just the architectural, the interior design. This is an image from our Los Angeles lab that I presented a couple of years ago. We won the Best Restaurant Design of the Year award. Interestingly here, for those of you that are suffering with supply chain issues in terms of construction and sourcing and cost, we quoted this out. It's a gorgeous space, 5,600 square feet. Bids came in at $3.2, $3.3 million. We were able to build it for 1.3 because we shipped everything from overseas. Even the workers, not in a container, we flew them in. But basically, building the restaurants off-site, putting them, disassembling them, putting in a container, and assembling them in 17 days. So there's a lot of, once you start going global, there's a lot of learnings in terms of reducing construction cost, specifically in the US, where we've seen construction costs go up 20, 30% just during the pandemic. So really capitalize on the design. A lot of the things that we've learned in our test labs, this is one from over in Europe, is also depending on how we position bar, how we position the different products, we can actually manage the mix between food and beverage and bar, right? So, depending on how we design the physical asset, just through design, same menu, we can bring beverage sales from 50% to 70%. So very interesting tools that we can actually apply and iterate and test. And there's a lot of learnings that we actually have from the retail space. Some of you have seen this before, but I think it's really important. As designers, we always focus or often focus on the actual physical assets, the design, the prototypical design, whatever that is. But don't forget the touch points. This is our pizza box. Everyone said that we were completely crazy when spending so much money on a pizza box. What you touch is silk. It slides open, the interior is gold. But interesting data is we do a lot of research globally, and we took the same food and put it in a white box and in our box and asked consumers how much would they be willing to pay for the same product, exactly the same product, 27% more. That gives you a feel for the importance of design beyond the physical asset. What we did not expect is that 80% of guests that orders our to-go boxes post it on social media. So rather than taking the budget from OpEx, we take it from marketing. And it's really, really interesting because if you think of it, having a user-generated content for $1, it's extremely cheap, given how important it is for consumers. So we have also done some analysis of packaging and how people are willing to pay more for interesting packaging because of the brand association. And interestingly enough, it's really seeing, and this is actually a research from the US, where the younger generations are more inclined to be associated with cooler packaging than older generations. So there's a lot of potential when you think of new designs and new concepts in how to monetize on that. Another very important trend we're seeing is unexpected competition. With the disruption of COVID, we're really seeing a blurring of the lines between restaurants and everything else. And I'm going to share some examples, right? You all know this guy, 1,000 restaurants. He's got 1,000 outlets, right? And nobody knew who he was 2 years ago. I speak internationally, nobody even knows who Mr. Beast is, right? So it's very interesting that a guy that has no connection to food now becomes our competitor. And very interesting is the trend that we're seeing in Asia, which is even beyond this. We do see in the domestic, we take influencers, Tim Hortons had a great example with Justin Bieber, how influencers and associations with brands are important. What fascinates me is what we are seeing internationally with this. These three ladies are not real. They're virtual. They're virtual influencers. In China alone, the virtual influencer marketing is 333 billion renminbi, which is a $52 billion business today, not in the future, today. A lot of the really cool brands are now moving from physical influencers to virtual influencers. And this is not stopping, this is coming your way. So it's very interesting to follow if you can dig a little bit deeper in it. Very interesting, we're seeing this not only on TikTok, but a lot of local players is actually social media becoming our competitors. Social media have more data on our consumers, on our consumers' behaviors than we have. They know exactly what they look at, what foods, what they're looking for, what are the trends, and they are actually going to become restaurant operators, whether directly or through third parties. But we really need to be prepared. Like a few years ago, we were talking about the delivery companies becoming our competitors. Social media is going to become our competitor, and we're seeing this big time in Asia. Because of this, it's extremely important that we start thinking beyond the physical assets. I'm an architect myself, a lot of you are in the room, and we're very focused on the physical asset, but we need to start thinking about brands differently, right? And how to associate brands beyond the physical asset. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept. It's called Vicio Vice. It's out of Spain. It's a brand that started virtual and became a cult without even having a physical store, right? People are tattooing their brand, painting their hair, doing all sorts of cool things, right? To the point that without having a single physical store, they did and pulled off a collab with Nike. And you could buy a Vice pair of Nike sneakers in the Nike flagship store in Barcelona. So they built the cult following globally. I mean, they have followers in Japan, and it's just a virtual brand out of Barcelona, and now have raised capital to roll out physical assets. Very, very interesting move. And that shows you this crossing between, restaurants, retail, social media. There's not a distinct line with this. We're seeing increasingly retail brands moving into F&B. They used to not be our competitors. And we all talk about the death of retail. Well, a lot of retailers, and we're working with a bunch of them, are now coming into our traditional space, right? Because they have the client. They have the following. It's easier for them to just create a product. And we're seeing that, our products and our menus being commoditized because the experience and the brand associations are taking over. This is an example from KFC in Malaysia, where they created a whole line of swag that were extremely successful. So how in different markets people really want to be associated with brands. It's very interesting to see that a food or a restaurant brand goes beyond the physical asset. And we're seeing the other way around, CPG brands approaching restaurants to do meal kits and to do products that you have on the supermarkets, despite they not necessarily being in your core menu. So just brand association. We're now working with Pepsi on a lot of really cool initiatives. So CPG companies going into our physical space and becoming restaurants. And we're going to see more and more of this. Another big trend is hotels. I think hotels are a little bit ahead in the commoditization. The fact that the room is a commodity. Consumers are not choosing where to stay based on the room. They're choosing where to stay based on what's happening on the ground floor, what's happening on the rooftop. It's a huge potential for us as restaurants. Because hoteliers, we're now working with 5 of the biggest hotel brands in the world, creating new F&B strategies. Because they realize that unless the F&B becomes the driver, they're just price. Right? So it's very interesting for you as you think of rollout development. This is no news. The delivery wave. But what is interesting is the stats, right? 2 years ago, 18%, 1 year ago, 29%, today, 61%. And interestingly is the Canadian graph, right? If you compare internationally, the countries that have had the harder lockdowns have a higher adoption and are not going back as markets reopen, which is very fascinating. This is going to be $1 trillion. A lot of you, I know, and we're doing with a lot of you, stores that are just off-premise, creating secondary lines for production in the kitchens, back doors for delivery drivers, etc. This is extremely popular and important. It's not going to go away. And there's this whole rise of the pickup only. And what we're seeing internationally is a hub and spoke trend. So basically brands creating experiential flagship units where you create the brand value and the association with the guest, and then a lot of spoke units that are just delivering. So when the consumer think that they're ordering the food from the flagship, they're just getting it from somewhere really close. We do have over 100,000 virtual brands in the US alone. I've tried to get the stats on global, it's impossible. It's probably over 1 million brands globally. This is hard competition. A lot of these did not exist 2 or 3 years ago, so we really need to be prepared of it. It's not only the virtual brands that are starting. We're now working with the founders of Foodora and Just Eat, which are the equivalents of Uber Eats here, in creating virtual food courts, right? Curb is one of our clients, where you actually have a physical asset in a space where you can eat, but you can order from 5 or 6 different brands. And they're going to not big city centers, they're going to secondary, to tertiary markets, where they become the place to be. Within the same space, you can order from a lot of restaurants and you can enjoy it in an actual asset. And we even see very interesting trends and interesting opportunities for you guys, because coming here, we're now working with the Dubai airport, which is the world's biggest airport for international flights, where you can actually, as a passenger, order food from 20 different restaurants, and the food is delivered to the gate. So as consumers, we don't necessarily need to eat the ugly, shitty food that we get from our airlines. We could actually choose, hey, I want my sushi, I want a burger, and it's going to be waiting for us at the gate as we board the plane. And this is not only on airplanes. We're seeing it on cruise ships. We're seeing it. There's so much potential for our business to think differently and go beyond what we used to call the non-traditional units. You know that? Oh, let's create something on the side that could be applied in casinos and stuff. This is really a big business opportunity. I don't know if you follow this. This news is from a week ago, 10 days. So McDonald's has now filed trademarks for brands in the metaverse. I was in Dubai last week speaking at Gulf Food, and I visited the Meta Terrace, which is the first actual physical space for restaurants in the metaverse. This is going to be gigantic. The fact that, specifically combined with investors in the gaming industry, we can sit with our friends, everyone in their own home, and actually socialize and eat food together in a physical space, although in the virtual world, and everyone can get the food delivered to their homes. So a lot of brands are going to do virtual assets and design virtual assets. We are now starting to get engaged to design restaurants in the metaverse, which I would never think it would happen. And it's happening extremely, extremely fast. So this is one to follow. But I also want to make sure that we're a bit down to earth and not just futuristic. It's, what is the big challenge that all our companies are facing? And it's very important because I hear a lot about labor costs and COVID. Compare the stats of the challenges, for those, labor costs and COVID with recruiting and retaining employees. It's really hard, and it's not coming back. I promise this is the last graph. More people are leaving our industry than ever recorded. And this is not only in the US. We're seeing it even in low labor markets like Southeast Asia or the Middle East. It's happening exactly the same. People are finding other jobs. So we as designers and creators need to find out new ways of designing our restaurants, right? One big trend that we're seeing is the de-skilling. So simplifying operations, making menus simpler, and use a lot of equipment and pre-batching. So we can hire people that have no experience in our industry and therefore not depend on skilled labor. And this is something that is applicable to the whole industry. And we're seeing it even from fine dining all the way to QSR. Because if we take the skill away, what we can hire is for attitude. And that really changes the game. This whole new generation of workforce, the Gen Z, they really want to be treated as who they are, express themselves, and be hired based on who they are. So cross-training is really important. We do a lot of cross-training in our restaurant labs, and COVID has really been very interesting. We've been able to be cash flow positive during the whole pandemic, and at the peak, we don't have anyone in the back of the house or in the front of the house. Everyone is cross-trained on all stations, right? And thanks to that, we were actually, and I don't know if you use this metric, but if you don't use it, I would recommend you do, is guests per labor hour. How many guests do you serve with 1 labor hour? on the peak of the pandemic, we were actually able to run the whole restaurant. This is a large unit with only 2 team members, thanks to cross-training, and therefore gain the efficiencies. Another thing that we worked a lot is in gamifying training and making it really simple. We know that the newer generation's attention span is very, very short. So training has to be digital, has to be on the phone, and we recommend that training modules are never longer than 5 minutes. 5 minutes for this new generation is an eternity. I got 2 teenagers, 17 and 19. There's not more than 2 seconds on each before they scroll. So really understand how we do need to change the behavior in our training modules. And now to, I think the biggest disruptor of all, which is cooks as a service, the robotics. Everyone is looking at it, and what I'm going to share is a few examples, not of the future, but of today. These are things that are happening as we speak. And the big change is that you don't need to buy the equipment anymore. You rent it. It's cooks as a service. So this is a picture from Dubai last week, where I, for the first time, ordered a meal and got a hot meal without any human interaction. So I was able to, through my phone, personalize the spiciness, the ingredients I wanted, and a robotic kitchen took the ingredients, put it in the equipment, cooked it, fried the chicken, fried the veggies, did a noodle, put it in a bowl, served it to me, and remember my preferences. So next time I order, they know exactly how I want my product. It's extreme personalization. They can store billions of recipes, and you could even have influencer marketing. So you can have an influencer creating a recipe and ordering it online. Very, very interesting. Asian food, pastas, they had a lot of things. We've, over the last 2 years, creating a number of fully robotic kitchens, both in the US and internationally. And this is only feasible because of this software or robotic as a service. One interesting tool is the hot fridges, where we actually can hold lasagna, for example, in a week at service temperature. So it takes 10 seconds. Just open the fridge, take it out, and it's ready to serve. So the technological advancement in equipment is really, really interesting for de-skilling and speed of service. We've seen a lot of companies, trying to get serving robotics moving around the room. We really don't believe that's the future, but this is really interesting. This is a robotic ceiling from the Athletic Olympic Village in Beijing, where actually food is cooked in the kitchen, goes up to the ceiling and moves through the whole ceiling and arrives at your table. So you don't have the whole room, full of robots running around. It's extremely efficient, and it also gives another dimension to how we design our restaurants. Tencent, Alibaba, and JD are the biggest online companies worth billions in China. And they have a really interesting solution. It takes less than 15 minutes from the moment you order your food to you pick it up. When I heard this, I thought it was unbelievable. How the hell do you do that? And what they've done is they've found a solution to the last mile. Rather than have, delivery drivers that are a cost, motorbikes, etc., what they do is they drone the food, but rather than droning it to your home, they drone it to drop-off stations. So as you can see in the picture to the right, the drones arrive to the station. The food is then put into a structure where you can either pick it up, you walk down from your apartment building, and these are everywhere in Shenzhen. You pick it up directly, or they have a runner without any bike or anything, just doing the last 100 meters, right? Taking the food from these cubbies and taking it to your home. Very, very interesting model, and we're seeing this, being rapidly expanded. They've done 1 million deliveries already. This is another Tencent solution. They're now doing 60,000 deliveries in autonomous driving per day. 60,000 in one city only. Imagine when this starts to scale. It's not only about, we can outsource to different operating model, cloud kitchens, Kitopi is actually buying existing restaurants. They're growing at a speed that they're not even able to build enough restaurants, so they have acquired 200 brands and still have $450 million in cash at the bank to acquire more brands. So these companies that we thought were outsourced and people that we can count us for our development are our real competition. Right? right? And growing faster than we can. So technology is much more than just, the touch points, and what you do is, how do we go from what has been COVID, seamless experience, frictionless experience, we've all heard this, to completely contactless experiences. There's a lot of things that are completely autonomous, and I'm going to share a couple of examples. One of the biggest challenges in our industry is fulfillment. Our servers or runners, create a to-go package, it's sent, something is wrong, the consumer's pissed off, and it's too late, and we need to do vouchers, etc. Now, Max Burgers out of Scandinavia have artificial intelligence fulfillment cameras that don't allow the bag to leave the restaurant until the order is exact. And machines are much better than we as humans are in doing these things. This is a real image from the first time I see a fully robotized dishwashing system. And not only does it, pick all the dirty dishes, it does the pot wash. It puts it in the conveyor belt, it cleans it, but it also stacks it, right? So for the first time, we can fully automate the whole back of the house cleaning system. It really understands, even with 20 different types of plateware and dish and glassware, it can store it and stack it, even after it's clean. And the last thing I wanted to show you is Hyper. This is an Israeli company. They partnered up with Pizza Hut in Israel and created a fully autonomous container that can produce 50 pizzas an hour. If you haven't seen it, I recommend that you Google it up and look at the videos. It is truly amazing, because this is now being applied to a number of different segments. It's not only the pizza. And it even folds the box, puts the pizza in the box, and puts it into a hot holding cabinet for delivery drivers to pick up. Zero human interaction, 240 different pieces of dough done there. So very, very interesting. I could speak for hours, as Michael knows. I said next time, I want to have the whole morning so I can share more things. But I didn't want to leave you without giving you some freebies. If you scan this QR code, you're going to get our trend research for 2022, trends in hospitality, and a lot of other interesting reports and research that we do globally. And as I said, time's up, but I just wanted to let you know that I'll be around, happy to answer any questions or share more insights with you all. I think we covered a lot. I apologize for that once again. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks.